No one wants to pay taxes. Not before retirement, and certainly not in retirement. Today we're going to talk about required minimum distributions and how to minimize the tax consequences of those RMDs. I'm a certified financial planner and the owner of an independent financial planning firm, and every year we help retirees identify the best tax, saving, income, and withdrawal strategies that work towards their retirement goals. The truth about taxes in retirement is very different from what we are led to believe online. It's very easy to feel like there is a tax bomb somewhere in your future, and it would be reasonable for that tax bomb to instill fear in you. But the reality is that fear, especially when it comes to taxes, often leads to decisions with consequences that we may not always be clear on. Let me illustrate this with a story. I had a client come to me. He was 59 years old at the time and had accumulated significant wealth, about $3 million in a blend of investment accounts, along with a nearly paid off house valued at around $1,200,000. Now, he had been widowed a few years back and had phased slowly out of work after the passing of his wife and wanted to formalize a plan for his retirement. He explained to me that most of his assets were in pre-tax accounts, that he hadn't saved much into Roth accounts and regretted it, and was living in fear of two things: large future required minimum distributions, and the cost of private health insurance now that he was no longer insured by his employer, but was still several years or so from Medicare age. As a result, he explained that he was doing his best to minimize his income so that he could obtain Affordable Care Act subsidies for his health insurance. He explained that he was trying to calculate whether that was indeed in his best interest, or would it be better to perform Roth conversions to avoid this tax bomb that I alluded to earlier. So I asked him how much he had been living on for the first full year of his retirement. He explained that he'd been living off about $70,000 a year in withdrawals, which ended up being about $55,000 in spendable money, in order to stay below 4 times the federal poverty limit to obtain those healthcare subsidies. So I asked him again, did living on that amount of money feel like what he expected his retirement to feel like? He replied to me and said, absolutely not. I feel like I haven't retired. I feel poor. It feels like I'm just getting punished no matter what I do, that I can't spend my money or I'm going to lose my subsidies, or if I spend more money, I'm going to end up paying more in taxes. He explained that just before meeting with me, he had almost impulsively pulled the trigger on a substantial Roth conversion, and that the only reason he didn't pull the trigger was because he had been worried about losing his healthcare subsidies. He said that he felt stuck between a rock and a hard place. Now, this gentleman was blinded by his fear. His fear was taking him along for a roller coaster ride between being paralyzed into spending dribbles of his assets and not feeling retired while doing so, versus impulsively triggering a huge taxable event by performing a substantial Roth conversion, the value of which he explained he did not really know. And this is a really common bind many retirees find themselves in. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to share the process we walked this client through to help him figure out a plan to minimize his RMDs and manage his tax liabilities, all while helping him feel retired. The first thing we did together was identify his tolerable withdrawal rate. Think of the tolerable withdrawal rate as the most dollars he would have been able to withdraw out of his accumulated retirement savings that year. Now, we weren't telling him he should spend that amount, but we explained that starting by understanding what the portfolio could tolerate as a withdrawal amount would help him see his situation more clearly. Based on his asset allocation and using a modern guardrails withdrawal approach, we found that his portfolio of roughly $3 million could tolerate as much as $162,000 in withdrawals this year, or up to a 5.5% distribution rate. So almost 2.5 times what he had withdrawn in the prior year, his first full year of retirement. He had no idea that a retirement income of that amount was even in the realm of possibility. He explained to us that he knew that he had a lot of money, but he really didn't feel like he had a lot because he hadn't felt comfortable pulling money out of his accounts and losing his subsidies. So the next thing we did was quantify the actual value of those Affordable Care Act subsidies that he was receiving. He was receiving roughly $7,000 per year in financial benefit from those healthcare subsidies. So basically, as soon as he passes the 4 times the federal poverty level in income, he would lose $7,000 of value as a result of having to purchase health insurance on the private market. Well, the difference between his tolerable withdrawal amount, which is $162,000 versus the $70K he was actually withdrawing, resulted in a difference of $92,000. So clearly he had the financial wiggle room to absorb the additional cost of private health insurance, that $7,000, and then some. So the next step in this process was to ask, even if you don't feel comfortable spending that $162,000, the tolerable withdrawal limit. What did you imagine yourself doing with your wealth in retirement? He explained that he had imagined spending that time with his wife, traveling around the world 3 to 4 times a year. Now, his wife was no longer with him, and he told us that he felt that he was young enough to meet a new partner and that he would like to do that if possible. That he felt that his fears around taxes and spending in retirement were holding him back from exploring that possibility. So we asked him how much he imagined that it would cost him. He said that if he had $25,000 a year as a travel budget, he felt that he could accomplish and enjoy all the things that he had hoped he would. So we added up his cost of living, about $50,000 a year, and then we added in the additional cost to replace his subsidized health insurance, another $7,000. And then we added in $25,000 of travel budget. And all of that totaled about $82,000 of required after-tax dollars, which would make him feel retired. Now, to produce that $82,000 of after-tax spendable money, it looked like it would require about $105,000 of pre-tax withdrawals, which was still an effective distribution rate of roughly 3.5%. And that left him with about $50,000 of what we call distribution wiggle room. So we were now ready to address those looming RMDs that he had mentioned earlier. We explained that we understood that seeing the fact that you might have large RMDs that push you into higher future tax brackets can trigger this desire to perform Roth conversions. Pay the tax now to avoid that tax bomb in the future. It makes a lot of sense. But we explained that there were a few crucial things to consider here. The first thing to consider is the question, how much stress will bringing taxes forward put on your portfolio today, and therefore your ability to spend and enjoy? If the cost of paying the tax for the Roth conversion will push your withdrawal rate above a tolerable limit or above a psychological limit, then it may not be wise to do that. Now, in this client's case, he would have about $50,000 of distributable money to allocate towards the cost of a Roth conversion before it would push him above the tolerable withdrawal limit. If he wanted to stick to a 4% withdrawal rule, he would still have about $15,000 of space to perform Roth conversions, even with the extra spending for travel. Now, a financial planning tool would likely recommend doing a far larger amount of Roth conversions in the early years of his retirement. But this leads to the second thing to consider, the time value of money. Basically, money spent on current experiences and things is worth more and brings more joy and satisfaction than money spent on future experiences and things. The central question here would be, if the financial planning tool recommends far larger amounts of Roth conversions in early retirement, how much of those current experiences and things will the cost of that Roth conversion crowd out? And then the client would need to decide, do I accept a higher withdrawal rate in order to absorb the cost of the Roth conversion? What if that withdrawal rate is 7 or 8 or 9%? What if I don't want to accept the cost of the conversion by taking on a higher withdrawal rate? Then where do I cut my spending in order to accommodate the Roth conversions? Well, obviously the spending that would be cut would be the discretionary spending. So that would be things like travel, gifting to kids, and the like. Then we really have to evaluate if that's a trade that we want to make. So ask yourself, put yourself in this client's position. If you're 76 years old and less physically able to do activities, things like play handball with your grandkids or take a scuba diving trip, does paying taxes at 76 crowd out spending at that age when you would not be able to do those travel likely? And where would you regret not being able to spend at that age? Or would the inverse be more true? Would paying the cost of a Roth conversion tax today that would actually restrict you from being able to take that extra trip across country to see your grandkids, or restricts you from that scuba diving trip with your partner? Which of those scenarios would be less desirable? Now, ultimately, this client whose story I've been sharing with you today decided to forego the Roth conversions and test out a year of higher personal spending. He told us that he had imagined spending his retirement with a partner, and that his wife's surprise early passing left him feeling a huge gap. And as he progressed through the year, he actually met a new partner and planned 3 amazing trips. He reported back to us that he would never have felt that that was possible, nor would he have given himself permission to do those things. And he felt absolutely elated at the prospect that he could both meet a new partner to spend his retirement with, but also still do the traveling he had imagined doing with his deceased wife. Now, the reality is there are no gimmicks to avoid taxes. The best you can do is balance a seesaw of trade-offs. If you pay taxes today so that you don't pay taxes tomorrow, you have to give up something in return, which is current day spending. If you pay taxes later so that you don't pay taxes today, you have to give up future spending and take on the risk that tax rates may be higher in the future. And knowing that, there are still ways to manage the taxes that large future RMDs could incur. A couple of those ways are to sequence withdrawals from pre-tax accounts in the years leading up to RMD age so that you can smooth out future shifts to higher tax brackets. This would look like strategically withdrawing from pre-tax accounts such that you would distribute enough from those pre-tax accounts before RMD age so that you're not kicked into higher marginal brackets once RMDs kick in. You could also perform qualified charitable distributions if you're charitably inclined and have the luxury to afford them. Qualified charitable distributions allow your RMDs to be satisfied or partially satisfied, tax-free to both you and the end receiver, as long as the receiver meets specific requirements. And a third strategy might be to tax locate specific parts of your asset allocation into pre-tax accounts. For instance, income from interest-bearing investments like bonds are going to be taxed at income tax rates no matter what type of account you hold them in. Bonds also tend to grow more slowly than stocks, and so holding bonds in a pre-tax accounts can end up being net neutral from the perspective of the income generated, but also the gains on underlying bonds are likely to be smaller. Therefore, holding those in pre-tax accounts can limit the eventual size of that account and therefore the RMD. The trick here is to know what you're optimizing for and live in accordance with those values. Now, philosophically, at Peak Financial Planning, we support people's desires to maximize their present-day joy from their wealth. And this looks like helping people understand the spending tolerances of their wealth first, and then encouraging them to explore how that spending can bring them joy. We believe that as long as there are good predetermined contingency plans in place, then clients will know how and when to rein spending back if that is warranted. As a result, we often explain that paying taxes in the future is basically a bargain that purchases present-day flexibility or optionality. So I hope you found this exploration helpful. If you'd like to learn more about how we help our clients build and prioritize their retirement plans, you can visit our website at www.thepeakfp.com. And as always, thank you for your time and attention, and see you in the next video.